Good evening, ladies as well as gentlemen. My name is still Boris, and we are back with part 5 of the Primordia playthrough. In our last playthrough, we didn't get very far, but we learned a lot of very interesting information about Metropole, the city that was once run by a council of robots, but is now run by a very, very shady one named Metromind, who has an ally named Scraper, that's the big ugly who stole our power core, and whom we will at some point maybe need to confront if we want to get our power core back. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and explore the city some more. We need to, at some point, go into the Underworks to try to find our Gospel of Man, and perhaps find Clarity, which was the former law robot Arbiter's clerk. And we could also try to search for Arbiter himself and see if we can get our power core back through the legal system.
Hey boss, look! That repair bot has a floating helper just like you do.
There's a red, burning, crashed hover bus and a writhing electrical cable. And that's the first thing you notice?
I can't help it. She's beautiful.
Well, you're not getting to her until we deal with this cable. I can't safely grab it.
Alright, well, if we can't grab the cable, how do we get it? Crispin!
Crispin, can you fly around the cable and push it off the street?
But didn't you just say it's too dangerous to get close to it?
I'm giving you a chance to impress her, Crispin. Just fly up high enough that you don't get close to the sparks.
Fine.
Okay. Now, there's a robot repairing this bus. Repairbot's probably not the best source of information, but hey, might as well talk to him, see if we can get a little bit of a different spin on things than the shady junk peddler and the obviously...
She's like a star in the heavens.
That's a light bulb, Crispin.
Well, it must be incandescent because she's making my circuits awfully hot.
Wow. I didn't even know that happened. Anyway, let's see if we can get some better information than what we got from the shady junk peddler, and from the information, and then from the obviously edited information in the kiosk.
Excuse me.
Can't you see I'm working?
I've said it before, but I'll say it again. You do know this ship is never gonna fly again, right?
You're right about that. This old airing bus can hardly fly to begin with. Still, there might be some parts here that Metromind can use to get another bus up and running. Anyway, what do you want?
Hey, boss, ask him about his helper.
So I'm really interested in information about the council, in particular who the 5th member was, that the kiosk omits, and that Leopold can't remember.
You mentioned Metromind.
Yeah, sure. She's in charge of this big circuit board we call Metropole.
What can you tell me about her?
What do I look like? The information kiosk? I want to know what I think? Metromind is the best thing that ever happened to this place.
Really?
Really? You, me, all these other machines grinding about. We're just tools in the toolbox. But Metromind, she's got the master plan. Progress. Got a nice ring to it, too.
So as part of the master plan, crashing buses into roads?
Look, there's plenty of rust to go around, but Metromind's the only one scrubbing. Not her fault that some of the metal's too far gone.
It looks to me like you're the one scrubbing, not Metromind.
Like I said, I'm just a tool in the box. Now, I gotta get back to work.
Metromind definitely has a way with bad logic, that's for sure.
You again? What do you want?
Since you're so close to her, do you know how I can talk to Metromind?
Ha! Talk to Metromind. Look, Metromind has an entire city to run, but her eyes and ears are everywhere. If she wants to talk to you, she will.
That sounds ominous.
What happened here?
What does it look like? The airing bus's motor gave out and it crashed. Into the only branch leading from Main Street to the rest of the city center.
Was anyone on board?
Sure, but they've already been salvaged.
Salvaged? Not repaired?
Can't repair without parts. You can't get parts without salvage.
What about building new parts?
Yeah, I mean, what factory?
What about Factor? Isn't he a factory?
Sure, a decommissioned one. Look, everyone wants to spot bugs, but no one wants to write code. You got a better way to run a city? Go out and build one. Otherwise, get with the program.
Do you know where I can find a power source?
If I did, I'd have salvaged it myself and brought it to the tower.
That is a Metromind fan right here.
My friend is curious about your helper.
She's just a sidekick factor build. Alice is ever rolled off the assembly line back in the day, but she's probably the only one left. Really not much more than a floating lantern, and headlamps are a lot cheaper.
She says you're not much more than a floating plasma torch.
She's right.
This robot is very strange. Well, we already know who the big robot is, and that he's probably unlikely to be found, and even if we could find him, we probably don't want to. As for when the bridge will be passable, pretty clear, not anytime soon. So, that's it that we can get from this robot.
Goodbye.
We cannot talk to her.
A floating light bot is holding a spool of copper wiring.
It's she! And what is she?
Funny. Alright, let's go out here then.
Looks important.
This building looks important. What is it? Let's see if any of these robots can help us out.
Ahoy, my dear friend. Oswald Factorbuilt at your service.
It's no more your dear friend than Rex as your creation, you besotted gear oiler.
Oh, don't mind Cornelius. He's been bitter since the first great rolling brownout.
Better, better, I'll show you better, you backbiting bot snatcher.
I think I like these guys, boss.
Me too. Alright, so let's go ahead and ask them all these questions, because we definitely want to know what this building is, why they're here, and what's going on.
What's in that building?
Why, Arbiter's court, of course. Why else would we be here?
I need to see Arbiter.
We all do, my dear friend. But the courthouse is locked, and first comes, first served.
Why are you waiting in line?
Justice. I'm here for justice. To prove that I, Cornelius Factorbuilt, created this marvelous machine, Rex. Rex Cornelius built.
Ignore him, my dear friend. Candidly, he is 10-23 flops short of a kilo, if you catch my drift. The machine's name is Oswald Built. Rex Oswald Built.
This is over a name? Why not just let Rex decide?
Ridiculous. This is about principle.
This is about pride.
So, boss? Would you fight over me like this?
You could call yourself Crispin Crispian for all I care. As long as you still pull things off ledges for me, that is.
Glad to know I'm loved.
How are you going to decide who gets Rex?
For the law, fool. The law.
Please excuse my brother. He can barely remember pi to the 23rd digit, let alone his manners.
For
I rest my case. Suffice it to say, chap, we await the reopening of the courthouse. Or more precisely, we await a summons from Arbiter who will decide our case.
who will say whose contribution was more important? Who will say, in fact, that my contribution was more important?
Okay, so this is the courthouse. This is one of the options available to us, perhaps, for getting back our power source, is to go through the legal system, through Arbiter, this robot of the law, and have him decide to give our power source back to us. But the courthouse is closed, that is one problem, and the other problem is that there's a line, so even if the courthouse opens, these other robots are going to get to go in before us. So if we want to have any chance at all of getting to see Arbiter, we're going to have to clear out this line, which means that we're going to have to find some way for the case to get solved for these two arguing robots. Now, I'm not interested in this question because we know who that is, and I'm not interested in this one because they're obviously not going to be able to help us out. We already know the power sources are in this tower. So let's go ahead and see if we can try to figure out some way to get these people out of the line.
Could someone else judge your case?
Of whom were you thinking? Metromine, perhaps? Authoritative, to be sure, but I fear she would claim Rex for the good of all.
And since the subway schemer
He means Metromine.
shut down our builder Factor, he cannot help either.
What about Horatio?
Who?
Me.
And why should we listen to you?
I've built a robot before, and I have no stake in this.
Yes, well and good, but this is a matter of law and logic. A bit harder than banging together a tin can like your companion. How can we know your reasoning is sound?
Well, this is interesting. So you have two options here. You can either find someone else, or you can have them test you. And probably the coolest way is to find someone else and have that person do the reasoning. Because remember, there is a law clerk of arbiters, Clarity, running about in the underworks, so if we could find her, she could judge the case very well. But I'm going to go for option number 3, test me, so if you can prove to them that you have good logic skills, then they will let you judge the case. And my day job is I teach standardized tests, and the test I teach the most often is the LSAT, which is basically, if you don't know what that is, it's the test people take to get into law school. It's a 100-question multiple-choice logic test. And so these guys essentially give you a logic game, which is right up my alley. It's the most excited I have ever been when playing any adventure game, because it's like finally a puzzle I can actually solve. So we're going to go ahead and try this approach.
Test me. An interesting proposition. What do you say, Cornelius?
What do I say? I say that you are a liar and a thief, Oswald. But as to this Horatio, well, as to him, so be it.
Boss, if they make us find 7 lost crystals, I'm quitting.
Righto. Consider this. At the binomial biennial, 7 robots in the probability circle are gathered for the party.
The what circle is gathered at the what? Is this some kind of vocab test?
I said quiet.
Each robot is either a factor-built or a Sternweiler built.
Blasted Sternweilers.
And moreover, each robot is designed with either a quad-core, a linear type, or a multiplex processor architecture.
This is ridiculous.
Pay attention. Factor or Sternweiler. Quad-core, linear type, or multiplex.
Indeed. Now I will tell you 3 things about these probabilitists. First, there are more factor-built robots than Sternweiler builds. Second, every linear type robot was built by factor. Finally, Sternweiler never built a robot with a quad core.
Now listen. Which of the following statements about the probability circle cannot possibly be true?
Okay, so let's go ahead and set up all of the information that we've got. We know that there are 7 robots here. Move this notepad. Oh, there we go. We know that there are 7 robots. Let's just call them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. We know that each one was either built by factor, which we'll abbreviate with F, or by Sternweiler, which we'll abbreviate with S. We also know that each robot has a particular kind of architecture. There's a linear type, which we'll call that L. There's like a multi thing, which we'll call M, and then there's a quad core, which we'll call Q. Notice how with logic, and if you ever have to take the LSAT because you're an aspiring law school student, the vocabulary is often very challenging in these logic problems, but it ultimately doesn't matter because what matters is the logic. Now let's go ahead and remember what the rules were, the 3 rules that Oswald told us. Number 1, there are more robots built by factor than by Sternweiler, so we're going to have to see more F's than S's. Second, we were told that every linear robot was built by factor. And third, we know that Sternweiler never built a quad core. So I'm going to use a tilde to mean not. So, or actually, let's just type out the word never, SQ. So we were never going to see S paired with Q. So these are the rules, but of course, in every logic puzzle, the real decider of your success is going to be your ability to make deductions. And so in this game, you can actually make quite a few deductions, even though it seems all very random. There's a few very concrete facts that you can figure out. So first of all, in this rule about the numbers, which tells us that there are more F's than S's, anytime that you have a rule about numbers, try to think about the numbers in concrete terms. Right now we have a pretty open-ended rule saying there are more F's than S's. But let's think about this concretely. How many F's can there be? How many S's can there be? Well, we know that if there are 7 robots total, then there have to be at least 4 F's, because if there were 3 or fewer, we'd end up having more S's than F's. So there have to be either 4, 5, or 6 F's. There can't be 7 because some of the robots were built by Sternweiler, so at least one of them is built by Sternweiler, so not all the robots can be factor built, but there are going to be 4, 5, or 6 of them, which means then correspondingly that there are going to be either 3, 2, or 1 S's. Okay, so that's an interesting deduction. Next, let's think about the pairings between the builders and the factor and the types of cores that they have. We know that every linear processor was built by factor. Please note this does not mean that every robot built by factor has a linear processor. You have to make sure that when you use logic statements like this, the conditional statements, you only go in the correct direction. And we're told that Sternweiler never built a Q, a quad-core processor. Well, think about what that actually means. If I see a quad-core processor robot, who built it? It had to be Factor, because Factor is the only other builder here. And if Sternweiler can't build any quad cores, then any quad core that exists must have been built by Factors. So what's interesting here is that 2 of the 3 types of processors had to have been built by Factors. So the question is, well, what kind of a processor could Sternweiler have built? If you can't build linear ones, and if you can't build quad core ones, that means that Sternweiler can only build multi-cores, or multi-lines, or whatever the M's were. And again, make sure you don't go in the wrong direction. This last rule here does not mean that all multi-core processors were built by Sternweiler. It does not mean that at all. Factor could have built multi-processors too. It's just that Sternweiler only built multi-core processors. Anytime we see a Sternweiler-built robot, it's going to have an M-type processor. So those are the deductions that we can make. Now let's go back to the game and see what the question is. It says, which of the following statements cannot possibly be true? Well, actually, this one's very, very easy. Look at choice 4 here. 4 robots were built by Sternweiler. There's absolutely no way, because we deduced that 3, 2, or 1 is the only possible number of Sternweiler-built robots there can be. There's no way that a majority were built by Sternweiler, because there were more F's, Factors, than Sternweilers. That was just a very, very simple deduction from the first rule. So let's go ahead and pick this choice.
4 robots were built by Sternweiler.
Good show. The preceding facts are unchanged. Now, answer this. If exactly 2 Factor-built robots have the same type of processor architecture, then which of the following must be true?
Okay, so this is a must-be-true question, which makes it a little bit more straightforward, but the piece of information that we're given is quite tricky. It tells us that exactly 2 of the Factor-built robots have the same type of architecture. Let's go ahead and make a new drawing here for this question to see what that would look like. So we know that exactly 2 of the Factor-built robots have the same type of architecture. And we know that there are a minimum of 4 robots here that were Factor-built. So let's go ahead and put those in. Here are our Factor-built robots. Well, we need to give all of them some kind of an architecture, but exactly 2 of them have the same type. That means that you cannot have 3 with the same type. It also means that you can't have 2 pairs. So let's say, for example, that we give them one of each. An M, an L, and a Q. Now this 4th one is going to be either L, M, or Q, and that will satisfy the condition that exactly 2 of the same type of processor architecture. The question is, could we have a 5th Factor-built robot here? And the answer is no. Because if we did, then we'd either have 2 pairs, or we'd have a 3 of a kind, and that is illegal, given the new condition that we were given for this problem alone. That means that the remaining 3 robots all have to be Sternweiler. This is pretty nice, because it gives away, essentially, the numbers of the problem. We now know that we have 4 F's and 3 S's, and from this deduction above, we know that anytime you see a Sternweiler robot, it must have a multi-processor architecture. So let's put those in under the S's. Okay, so now we've got a pretty complete sketch, actually. The piece of information Cornelius gave us leaves nothing to the imagination, leaves nothing to chance, except for this one Factor-built robot, which could have any of the 3 types of architecture. Okay, so the question is, which of the following must be true? Let's go ahead and see what our options are. 1 of the 7 robots has a quad-core processor. Well, actually, if we take a look back at our notes, that indeed must be true. We definitely need to have 1 robot with a quad-core processor. Now, it doesn't say that exactly, or it says 1 of the 7 robots had a quad-core processor, but we don't know that it was exactly 1, right? It's possible that this 4th one also had a quad-core processor. So let's take a look at the other choices as well. 2 of the 7 robots have linear-type processors. Well, that doesn't have to be true, because we could have 1, or if this one were also linear, we could have 2. So we could have 1 or 2. That's not a must-be-true statement. 3 of the 7 robots were built by Sternweiler. Ah, okay, this is definitely right. 3 of the 7 are definitely built by Sternweiler, so we're going to pick this choice. Fun fact, this first choice here is not very precisely written. It should really say exactly 1 of the 7 robots has a quad-core processor. That would mean that it is not a must-be-true statement. However, as it's written, it is true that 1 of them has a quad-core processor. It's possible that another one does as well, but just because 1 of them does doesn't mean that you can't have more. Anyway, that's just me, the logic teacher, talking. Let's go ahead and pick the correct choice.
3 of the 7 robots were built by Sternweiler.
Right. Here is the 3rd question. The facts are still unchanged. Which of the following types of processor architecture might you find in a probabilitist built by Sternweiler?
Okay, well this is really, really easy because we just deduced it straight away in the beginning that Sternweiler could only build multi-core processors. So that is, or multiplex, is that what it is? Okay, so that's it. Multiplex right here is the only one that he could build.
Only multiplex.
Well, it seems we underestimated you, my friend. I'm uploading the facts of our dispute to your data pouch. Please, take some time to consider, and let us know when you are ready to hear our arguments.
Okay, so now we're going to get to decide their case. Who owns Rex? Let's go ahead and take a look at all the relevant facts. Cornelius designed it, and Oswald assembled it. So there's the crux of the problem. One of them was the designer, one of them assembled it. Without either one, the robot wouldn't exist. Concept to completion took 4 years. The design time took 1 year. Okay, so Cornelius spent a year designing this robot, and then Oswald spent over 3 years building it. Cornelius invented new pneumatic drivetrain. Well, that's actually an irrelevant piece of information in disputing this case, because we're trying to figure out who owns the robot. What Cornelius did as part of the design doesn't really make any difference, so that is a totally irrelevant piece of information. The assembly includes servos, waldos, and crankshafts. That's, again, another totally irrelevant piece of information. For determining ownership, it really makes no difference what the robot is made from. So that's another irrelevant piece. We can ignore it. Cost of parts borne equally by both. Okay, so that's essentially it's a relevant piece of information, but it doesn't help decide the case, because if the two robots, Cornelius and Oswald, equally bore the cost of the robot, then that doesn't help sway the case one way or the other. Basic frame incorporates features of public domain. Model, that's another irrelevant piece of information. It doesn't really make any difference what the basic domain has or doesn't have. It doesn't help determine who owns the robot. Cornelius has several other well-known bot designs. That is completely immaterial, because that is just totally out of scope. What Cornelius did with other robots has absolutely no bearing on the case here, determining whether he owns this robot. Oswald has not built any other bots, but serviced Factor for years. Again, that's a completely irrelevant piece of information. What either of these two builders did for other robots makes absolutely no difference. So, actually, all this information is completely irrelevant, except for the information in the beginning, which tells us that it took Cornelius 1 year to design the robot and Oswald 3 or more years to build it. But the problem here is that you can't judge the case now without making some really arbitrary assumptions. For example, you could argue that Cornelius, that design is more difficult than construction, and that without Cornelius' input, the robot wouldn't exist. Whereas without Oswald's input, Cornelius could have found someone else to build it. But then you're just taking for granted, without any justification, that design is more important than construction. You could also argue that Oswald owns the robot because he spent more time doing the labor of construction than Cornelius did of design. But again, that's just based on an arbitrary assumption that the amount of time spent on something is the most significant contribution. The bottom line is that, as far as the law is concerned, there's no information here to determine which one of them owns the robot. You have to either assume that design is more important for ownership or that time spent constructing is more important for ownership, and neither one of these assumptions is really relevant. So who actually owns it? Well, I would say that, they both do. They both contributed to the construction. Neither one of them has any sort of a case for concluding that they are more entitled to ownership of the robot than the other. So that's going to be our decision.
I'm ready to hear your arguments.
Excellent, excellent. My dear friend, this is not a difficult case. In the Primordium, it was once said, 10 people have 10 ideas, and 20 idle hands. Wise Horatio, long years have passed, but the principle remains true. Did Cornelius have the idea for my beloved Rex? I concede he did. But who built him with his own claws and tools? Who hammered and soldered and wired Rex? That would be my humble self. Wise Horatio, a robot's fabronymic has the suffix built, not designed. And Rex is Oswald built, no matter who designed him.
Okay.
He makes a good case, boss.
What about you, Cornelius?
If you're so smart, you can figure this out for yourself. The question isn't what built Rex, but who built him. Your little friend there isn't named Hammer Built or Plasma Torch Built. You call him Horatio Built. Every robot uses tools to build. Oswald was merely a tool with tools. My vision was the creative force. And if you disagree, then you can go and rust in the rain.
What do you think, boss? Who gets to take credit?
So, we have some interesting options here. Clearly, both of these are not right. We could argue, I wanted to argue that they both have shared ownership of the robot, but that is not an option here. We could argue that Factor owns the robot, but that seems to be a little bit of a stretch to the imagination. I mean, yes, because Factor built both Cornelius and Oswald, and then they built the robot, but that would be assuming that ownership belongs to the ultimate creator of every object, which is not an assumption that we can support, at least from our knowledge of the law. So the closest thing to my option is no one. Saying that neither one of them singly owns the robot is, the closest that I can get to saying that they both own it together. So this is the option that we're going to go for.
No one can take credit. Neither of you could have built Rex without the other, so neither of you can put your name on him. His name is Rex Millbuilt, version 1.
Outrageous!
Surely, sir, you have misspoken.
No, I have not. In any case, Rex is his own robot. He can make up his own mind.
What fools we were to accept his judgment.
Indeed. Wait!
Well, boss, hats off to you.
You see what he did there? So, we got pissed off two robots here. They are not happy with that judgment, neither one of them, but at least we cleared them out of the line, and we got this bitchin' top hat. Remember, Leo the junk peddler was looking for something antique and fancy in exchange for the memory device, and that top hat sure looks like it qualifies. Let's go ahead and check it out here. Oh, look at that, so rad.
It's a fine felt hat. Given its age, it's in remarkable condition.
Okay, so we're coming up on we're coming up on 30 minutes here, so let's go ahead and have another pause. In our next episode, we're going to try to we're going to find out who these other people are, and we're going to try to clear them out of the line as well. So folks, we'll see you next time.